Hi, welcome to WHX Insights. I am joined by Reenita Das, a healthcare visionary with a finger on the pulse of transformative healthcare trends and growth strategies. She is also an integral member of WHX Tech's advisory board. Today, we will be chatting about Digitech return on investments as well as Femtech. Welcome, Reenita. How are you today?
Thank you so much, Farana, for having me. It's a pleasure, and I'm doing wonderful.
So, what we'd love to know is what emerging technologies are showing the most promise for improving patient outcomes while simultaneously reducing healthcare delivery costs?
That's a great question. So, the way I look at it is that what are we trying to do in healthcare? We are trying to solve the quadruple aim of healthcare, which is improving outcomes, reducing cost, improving patient satisfaction, helping to reduce patient burnout, and eventually creating more responsibility on consumers to take part in their health. So, if I look at the outcome versus technology scenario, I think the first winner I would pick would be remote patient monitoring because in the last 5 years, we've seen amazing examples of how remote patient monitoring has helped with stroke patients, with Alzheimer's patients, with patients who have had cardiac interventions going back home. And I think the ROI metrics clearly show that we've had reduced hospital readmissions, improved chronic disease maintenance. So the first place would go, in my view, to remote patient monitoring, having the highest patient outcomes in terms of ROI. The second area that I would choose is actually digital mental health tools. And the reason I choose that is that digital mental health really came about during COVID, but we've really been able to see that at industry scale, we've seen much better patient outcomes from digital tools. We've seen scores of depression coming down, scores of anxiety coming down with patients using consumers using digital tools. So I think the second place I would give would be to digital mental health. The third place in terms of ROI is really about virtual care. I think virtual care and the front door strategy, the digital door strategy has helped to improve adherence. It's helped to improve patient experience. And what is really helpful is that we don't have a lot of patients now who are not going for their appointments because now you have virtual care to take part in that. So that's improved by almost 60%. And the fourth area that I think now we're trying to see advancement in is the ambient AI for clinical documentation. And that's really helped in terms of reducing patient burnout, improving the doctor's performance, having more eye contact with their patients, and having the transcription and the entire consultation electronically created with the voice. And I think we're using a lot of that in many facilities all over the world. So I think these are the areas that I would give the highest in terms of ROI. I can't end this discussion without talking of AI, as you probably know. And my biggest bet in AI is really from the diagnostics point of view. Because if you look at it, AI can analyze medical images, whether it's CT scans, MRIs, and X-rays, at a much higher rate than a human radiologist can. And we're getting results of over 95 to 99% in terms of producing the reports. So I think that's a great area that can be a tool to support radiologists in making their job more efficient. So I think these are some of the areas that I would definitely, provide, say that this is the highest ROI in the industry for digital health tools.
Now, looking at these digital health solutions that have demonstrated the strongest ROI in your experience, what metrics best capture their value?
So I think when we look at ROI metrics, we've done a couple of studies with Frost and Sullivan, and one of the studies we did was to look at healthcare leaders and what they looked at in terms of their ROI. And we found that the biggest ROI is patient outcomes. In fact, 81% of doctors reported it as the top priority. And what is patient outcomes? We're talking about reduced readmissions rates, better management, better, shorter time in the hospital, less stress for the patient, less invasiveness for the patient. So I think that's one of the biggest and topmost of mind. The second is patient experience. We're putting a lot of emphasis today on patient experience. And we are seeing that doctors and clinicians rate it at 47% in terms of a convenience metric. Quality is also very, very important. We're looking at numbers of around 39% of doctors looking at it. What does quality mean? Accuracy in diagnosis, adherence to the protocols, having faster results better by using some of the more precision tools that we have. The fourth metric that we use for ROI is operational efficiency, which is really time saving, making integration much easier, making interoperability much easier between departments, between hospitals, between care settings. And of course, the last one that everyone talks about as first, and I talk about it last, is the cost reduction. The clinical cost reduction, we're talking about 16% less than before, and the administrative cost reduction as well. So these are some of the ROI tools that I would think about when I look at digital tools in whether it's in the patient's home, whether it's in a clinic, or whether it's in a hospital.
Now, based on your observation, what strategies have been most effective in increasing women's leadership representation in health tech? And how would you say this diversity has impacted innovation and product development?
Yeah, that's a very nice question. I think one of the things overall that I do want to mention is that we need to, as a society, we need to normalize women's leadership. I think we are constantly talking of women's leadership because it's not a normal situation, and we're pointing it out. We don't talk about men's leadership that way. And we need to be able to create a culture that normalizes women's leadership. Obviously, we're still living in a patriarchal culture. And that is why I think the change needs to happen from the kindergarten, ever since a child is born. We need to break down gender roles in society. And I think by normalizing that from a small age, we will slowly change the fabric of society. So I think women overall, we've made significant progress in the last 10 years, but yet we haven't made progress. We definitely need some of the strategies we definitely need is much more targeted leadership development programs focused on health tech. For example, like the John Hopkins Emerging Leaders Program in global health that they run. We need many more. I won't talk about mentorship because I think we've beaten it to death, but I think other areas that we can think about is changing the workplace, pay equity initiatives, family policies that are more friendly towards families, bias mitigation, removing unconscious bias and providing training to people. And many large companies are doing this. But if you look at the ecosystem of women today in health tech, we still receive less than 2% of funding. That's the sad part of it. So we're beginning to see a lot more women focused investment funds. I think there are about 10 or 12 right now in the world in the last 2 years compared to zero 6 years ago. We need to see more women in pitch competitions. We need to see have investors start education programs against gender bias and gender lens investing strategies. And I think the last area that I want to mention is that we need to create more representation and visibility of efforts. For example, recognition programs, say the top 50 women in health techs, more speaking opportunities for women, more media coverage of women. And I think the GCC and especially Dubai has done a fabulous job of some of this, of creating this kind of inclusive culture.
Now, again, digging deep into this as well, and given that women focused research could yield about 14 billion USD in economic returns, now what would you identify as the highest impact investment opportunities in women's health that still remain underfunded?
Well, I think I think everything remains underfunded. Unfortunately, we're 51% of the population, and the sad thing is that we're just beginning to learn that ever since a child is in the embryo in a mother's womb, deficiencies in health and wellness and mental health start from there. So if we're not focusing on the woman that is giving birth to that child from the womb onwards, we're really not focusing on the next generation. So if we look at women's health, we have to start with the womb. And I think this is very different from the way we've been thinking about women's health in the past. Because what we're doing is we're bringing children into the world with so many deficiencies that we could have fixed before by giving the help to women. Women spend 25% of their life in worse health than men, although we live longer. We've just begun to study the impact of hormones, the hormones on the brain, hormones as an impact for Alzheimer's and dementia, which is much higher in women. If you take migraine, women have migraines 7 times higher than men, but yet we have hardly any research that's focused on that. So I just think that there's so many areas that we need to start looking at women. I'm really happy with the work that's going on for fertility, for maternal mortality, some of the tools, the digital tools that have been helping to do that. But there's so much more work that needs to be done, and it needs to start with the brain and hormones, some elementary areas that we can work on.
Now, looking ahead, what are your predictions in the healthcare landscape?
Predictions, there's some great predictions. I think overall, if I look at it on a larger scale, antimicrobial resistance is going to become a big issue. We're going to see a whole new generation of superbugs over the next 10 years. Are we equipped to deal with it? We're working on it, but still we have a long way to go. I'm really excited about the whole aspect of single cell diagnosis that we talk about, where eventually we will be looking at a single cell and we could be at a point to make diagnosis based on that cell. Other areas that I'm very excited about in terms of predictions is some of the health risk assessment screening platforms that we're beginning to build using AI, especially for chronic disease management. If I look at the pharmaceutical space, I think the obesity pill that we've been talking about, the GLP-1s, they're going to become the paracetamol of the future. Other big areas that I think that we're going to do really well is things like lab-grown organs. We've already started working on that. The commoditization of gene and cell therapy, gene editing to help create a new category of medicines. From an insurance point of view, we're starting to work on wellness insurance. We're looking at cryptocurrency. And in terms of blockbusters today, I really see 2 or 3 big blockbusters coming on. Anything to do with the microbiome and the gut is going to be a very big blockbuster. Mental health, mood enhancing brain therapy, very, very great, very exciting. And the last area is any business that has got to do with aggregation. So if you're looking at starting a business in health tech, anything to do with aggregation will do really well.